Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Rahul Bansod, and I am a research intern at the Institute of the Chinese Studies, New Delhi. It is a matter of great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all to another edition of ICS Wednesday seminar titled The Rise of China's Silicon Valley, the Growth of Research and Development in Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area. In 2019, the State Council of People's Republic of China introduced its ambitious Outline Development Plan for Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau, Greater Bay Area, or GBA. This blueprint aims to create a major global economic hub by integrating special administrative regions of Hong Kong and Macau with the 9 cities of Guangdong province with a strong focus on innovation, technology, and research. The GBA is home to leading technology companies like BYD, Tencent, DJI, Huawei, with the 5 universities ranked among world's top 100. Today's discussion will explore the latest trends in research and development within the GBA, including the competitiveness of Hong Kong's universities within the region, changing landscape of research across academic, government, and industry sectors, and how research in GBA aligns with China's national priorities. We will also consider how academic quality is measured using indicators like field-weighted citation impact and how this varies across the research types, players, and fields. The speaker for today's seminar is Mr. Laurie Pierce, who is the advisor to the president and the college master at the Chinese University of Hong Kong in Shenzhen. In his role, he supports university leadership on global engagement and oversees a graduate college of over 1,500 students. Mr. Pierce has previously served as the associate vice president at CUHK's Hong Kong campus, working to enhance university's reputation and international outreach. Mr. Pierce has extensive experience in international engagement and has served on several boards and committees, including the Australia-India Institute and the Global of 8 Global Engagement Group. Before joining higher education, he was the CEO of Australia-China's Business Council. Moreover, he is fluent in Mandarin and has worked in China. The chair of today's seminar is Mr. Ravi Bhutlingam. He is an emeritus fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi, and fellow of Royal Geographical Society, London. He is also founder and chairman of Manas Advisory, which focuses on the top management, coaching, and integrating psychological science with an on-ground management experience. Mr. Bhutlingam has received specialized training in psycholinguistic, scientific methods, and Chinese culture under the mentorship of renowned scientist and sinologist Joseph Needham. He has served in several positions in various industrial groups and conglomerates. He has written extensively about how the application of science and psychology can enhance understanding between India and China. His research interests focus on the Chinese economy, history, and the Confucianism. Before I hand it over to the chair, I would like to ask all the participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the seminar. Questions may be posted in the chat box along with your name and affiliations. Alternatively, you may use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. You shall then be called upon to unmute yourself. Thank you. Now I hand it over to the chair. Over to you, Mr. Bhutlingam. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Wednesday seminar at the Institute of Chinese Studies. We have a particularly interesting subject today and an expert speaker who is going to tell us all about this fascinating area. And that is about China's Silicon Valley, the rise of research and development in what is known as the Greater Bay Area of southern China. I remember the Economist newspaper about 5 years ago asked a question: will China become a scientific superpower? And to cut it short, in the article ended on an equivocal note: it may or it may not. 5 years later, that is earlier this year, again in June, the Economist published another article with almost the same title. This time the title was, China has become a scientific superpower. Now, how did that happen? And what is its future is the question. And today, Mr. Laurie Pierce is going to take us through a practical journey about how China's Silicon Valley came about, what its future might be, how science and technology might proceed in China, the strength or otherwise of China's academic system in fostering research, fostering questioning and creativity, and so on. I can't wait to listen, so I will not say anything much. Over to you, Laurie.
Thank you so much, Ravi, and good afternoon, greetings from Guangzhou, the capital of Guangdong Province, in the heart of the Greater Bay Area. Thank you so much to ICS for the invitation, and it's wonderful to see your marvelous director, Alka, on the line. I had the great privilege of having a fascinating discussion with her in Delhi just 3 weeks ago. So I will share my screen and then we can formally get underway. Here we go. I'll just put that on slideshow mode and pray that it works. There we go. Okay, so you'll note that there's a question mark next to the rise of China's Silicon Valley. The Central People's Government in 2019 unveiled an ambitious blueprint to support the development of an integrated, massive city, which captures the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, the Macau Special Administrative Region, and 9 cities located on the mainland side of the border in Guangdong Province. So at its heart is a commitment to driving deeper economic integration between the 9+2 cities. And you can see signs of that really across just about every walk of life. But probably the most noticeable sign of the increased integration is in the infrastructure which connects the 9+2 cities. So for example, you can now get a train from West Kowloon in Hong Kong and be in downtown Guangzhou in as little as 46 minutes. You can now drive all the way from Hong Kong into Zhuhai, just next door to Macau, on the world's longest bridge of, I think, 44 kilometers, and you can do that in under an hour. And so the growing connectivity and the people-to-people links which this enables really is extraordinary. So we're looking at 56,000 square kilometers. We're looking at a population base of over 72 million, and you're looking at a very significant level of GDP. Of course, the GBA does not capture the entirety of Guangdong Province, but for context, Guangdong represents the largest provincial economy in all of China, and you're looking at a population base of around 120 million. Normally, when I go around the world and I give statistics like that about Guangdong and its population and just the sheer size and the scale of everything that we see here, in most places I go to, people look at me and it's just, and they're just marveling at the scale. But of course, I'm talking this afternoon to an Indian audience, and India also knows massive numbers and huge scale. So perhaps what I say in terms of numbers might not be immediately as surprising as it is to colleagues that I interact with elsewhere around the world. So what does this mean for innovation-driven development strategy? So at the heart of the central government's plan is a commitment to develop the region into a globally leading science, technology, and innovation hub. And there are a range of initiatives designed to implement policies and enhance cooperation among the GBA cities. They're focused on creating synergies by greater collaboration between universities, research institutions, and high technology enterprises to develop a robust innovation system. And I guess at its heart is a mission to transform the economic base of the region through the pursuit of what the central government now calls 新质生产力, or high quality productive forces. And so it's about ascending the value chain in high technology industry. And in order to do that, it means harnessing greater collaboration between universities, industries, and I guess that classic triple helix effect that exists when you get government, industry, and higher education working together to position the GBA as a global leader in innovation. So within the GBA blueprint, you see a commitment to develop a Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Hong Kong, Macau innovation corridor, which is designed to facilitate seamless collaboration across borders. And that sounds wonderful, but we are working through a range of very, very practical issues in terms of bringing that about. So, for example, because Hong Kong is a special administrative region under the One Country, Two Systems framework, it means that transfer of data across borders becomes problematic from a compliance and a legal and regulatory sense. And so you've got governments now on both sides of the borders which are looking at pragmatic solutions designed to facilitate things like that exist because of the unique nature of the two special administrative regions plus the mainland side of the border. And so getting things like genetic samples or patient data in particular across borders is particularly challenging because at the end of the day, we're talking about personal data, privacy, and a whole range of others. And so very practical issues that we're up against in terms of facilitating that seamless collaboration, but nonetheless a commitment from both sides of the border to really work them through. I should also say that it's very easy for me now to say that you can get a high-speed train from Guangzhou to Hong Kong in under 50 minutes. But for 3 years, it was impossible for us to do that by virtue of the COVID-19 pandemic. But we have seen a significant acceleration of cross-border travel after the full resumption after China fully reopened its borders at the beginning of 2023. There's a global positioning piece to this as well. And there's how the GBA as an entity, how it interacts and indeed how it competes with other Bay areas in the world, such as New York, Tokyo, and so on and so forth. And of course, the obvious comparison to make is the San Francisco Bay Area. So a range of initiatives in flight. But it's also worth noting, and I like to share this slide, that we talk about Hong Kong's role within the Greater Bay Area. And Hong Kongers are incredibly proud of their historic position within this broader ecosystem of southern Chinese cities. But it's important to remember that, as this slide demonstrates, that in 2018, Shenzhen as a city eclipsed Hong Kong in terms of GDP. And about 95% of Hong Kong's GDP is dependent fundamentally on services. So financial services being the obvious one, and its actual industry base and its manufacturing, a big part of that was, I guess, onshored or offshored, depending on how you look at it, to Guangdong province in the earlier years of China's reform and opening up. But if you look at pure GDP, Shenzhen has become a significant force to be reckoned with, eclipsing the Hong Kong SAR in 2018. As was said in the introduction to my talk this afternoon, Shenzhen is now home to globally iconic companies such as BYD, Tencent, Huawei, and DJI. It's worth noting that in my last visit to India, I was picked up from the airport at Indira Gandhi International, and I was picked up in a BYD vehicle. When I travel to Malaysia and when I travel to Thailand and I leave the airport, the first thing I see is an enormous billboard advertising BYD. And so as a city economy, increasingly what you see is its manufacturing base, delivering globally iconic companies that are competing aggressively on the global stage, working at a price point, but also a quality level, which makes them, of course, attractive. I've got Huawei on that slide, and we all know the fate of Huawei. It famously started perhaps in my home country of Australia when they were banned from taking a role in the national broadband network as early as 2011, and then Australia being the first country to prevent Huawei from playing any role in the construction of its 5G telecommunications network. But if you look outside of countries like India, Australia, the United States, and Canada, and if you look more broadly at the global South, and if you look at the inroads that Huawei is making in places like Africa, and so on and so forth, it's a globally competitive enterprise. And of course, last year, Huawei had a major leap forward with the launch of its own smartphone with a chip that was domestically designed against the backdrop of unprecedented United States semiconductor sanctions, and they were able to produce a phone that had their own chip that was basically eclipsing 5G standards. So major progress in high technology industry. But one of the things that's fascinating about the region is that if you take out Hong Kong and you look at the mainland side of the border, you're looking at not a single university ranked in the world's top 200. So let's think about that for a moment, and let's consider that Guangdong as a provincial economy has been for many, many years China's largest. It's home to globally iconic and globally competitive enterprises such as these, as well as a host of others that play an incredible role in global supply chains and in global manufacturing. But it is yet to produce a single university ranked in the world's top 200. It's also fascinating to consider against that despite its population of 120 million and major leaps that have been made over the last 40 years of higher education participation rates in China, more and more people going to university, Guangdong lags the national average of higher education participation rates. So fewer people compared to the rest of the nation going to university, not a single university ranked in the top 200, but a massive provincial economy and a huge concentration of high technology industry. So I guess partially in response to this, over the last 10 to 15 years, the Guangdong government has invested in partnership with the Ministry of Education up in Beijing and the central authorities. They've invested a lot of real political and financial capital in developing what's termed 中外合作办学 or Sino-foreign collaborative education. In other words, setting up branch campuses is the really kind of crude and perhaps oversimplified way, but indeed a globally accepted way of characterizing the ecosystem that you have. And so Guangdong province is now home to 6 such ventures, 3 of whom originate from Hong Kong. 4 of whom originate from Hong Kong. So you've got Beijing Normal University and Hong Kong Baptist. In Zhuhai, they set up the United International College. And you have my university, the Chinese University of Hong Kong in Shenzhen. We were established a decade ago. You also have Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, Guangzhou, which was established last year. You have City University of Hong Kong in Dongguan, which was established this year. You have Technion, who was set up in Shantou, and you also have the Shenzhen Moscow State University, Beijing University of Technology collaboration. So you've got 6 global universities who have been attracted to set up campuses in the province, and you also have a major drive in terms of building capacity in research and development, science and technology funding, and a whole range of national and provincial measures. So to put my university in a bit of context for you, we were established 10 years ago. Today, we're home to 11,000 students. We've got 7 schools, including a brand new Faculty of Medicine, which next year will open a new 3,000-bed affiliated hospital. We have a School of Data Science, a School of Science and Engineering, a School of Management and Economics, Humanities and Social Sciences, and we are on a growth trajectory that is seeing really, really rapid development. We are now the #1 university in Guangdong province in terms of Gaokao admissions. So we admit the highest quality students from the Gaokao examination in the entire province, and we've achieved that in 10 years. The Shanghai ranking, otherwise known as the academic ranking of world universities, they rank all of these joint venture campuses in China. For the last 5 years, CUHK Shenzhen has been ranked #1 in the country, and that places us above the likes of New York University Shanghai, Duke Kunshan, Nottingham Ningbo, and so on and so forth. But I guess the key point from this slide, other than my own little bit of propaganda about my own university, is that if you look at the ecosystem in Guangdong of universities that have been attracted here, the overwhelming majority of them come from the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region. So this is a sign of deeper integration and greater connectivity between the higher education ecosystems of Hong Kong and Guangdong, on the mainland side of the GBA border. It's also worth noting here that the development of the GBA as a policy blueprint provides a really important anchor for Hong Kong universities to navigate their collaboration in the mainland. Another interesting feature, which I think is a sign of things to come, is that historically the focus on these branch campuses has been cultivating undergraduate students in large numbers. It's been perhaps less focused on research, but earlier this year, the Guangdong government announced a new investment with each of the Hong Kong universities and their mainland collaborators, where each side would invest 10 million RMB over a period of 3 years. So 30 million each are going into a collaboration specifically focused on research and high technology and the development of a stronger cohort of postgraduate research students. So we are seeing a stronger pivot to fostering research collaboration between the Hong Kong universities and their mainland university counterparts. So I'm going to spend the rest of my talk giving you an overview of research performance in the GBA and Hong Kong. And you'll note that I've put there in parentheses and Hong Kong, and I've not put it there as part of the GBA, even though, of course, Hong Kong is part of the GBA. I've done it because what we hope to do is demonstrate the competitive advantage of Hong Kong, the value that it adds to the R&D ecosystem of the mainland side of the border, and just so that we can, through a few data sets where we show them together and then break them apart, you get a more accurate and more comprehensive picture of research and development in the GBA. I should also say, before we do that, that these universities, so Hong Kong, on a per capita basis, has more universities ranked in the top 100 than any other jurisdiction on Earth. So the ecosystem that I spoke about before on the Guangdong side of the border, where not a single university is ranked in the world's top 200, versus Hong Kong, a city of 7.5 million people with a heavily services-oriented economy, has been able to produce the number of universities that it has in the top 100. It explains a big part of the value proposition that Hong Kong can add to the development of research on the mainland side of the border, and also our international linkages. So the links that Hong Kong universities have internationally, and I'll share some data with you in a few moments that will talk you through that, give us a really strong competitive advantage. An acknowledgement that this research was the product of a collaboration between the global bibliometric and research data firm Elsevier, which is known to just about anyone involved in academia, which was commissioned by the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and it was a study that I commissioned in my final months as Associate Vice President of the Hong Kong campus, and it was launched in May this year. And at the end of the presentation, there is a QR code where you can download the full report. So what this slide demonstrates is the growth of R&D in the GBA and in Hong Kong from 2018 to 2022. And so you can see that the compound annual growth rate in the GBA was 18% against a growth in Hong Kong of around 10. And if you break down those bars there, you can really see the acceleration and the speed of growth in total publications over on the Guangdong side of the border, really quite substantial. Hong Kong contributes around 30%, just under 30% of the GBA's total research output. And what you can see is on this slide is that the increase in research output observed in the GBA and Hong Kong is, of course, supported by the growing number of active researchers in both regions, with the GBA doubling its active researchers from 18 to 22, and you've got 16% of those affiliated with institutions in Hong Kong. So total active authors in the GBA over this period have grown by nearly 20%. I often like to quote the former president of Nanyang Technological University in Singapore when he said, there are three ingredients, three magic components to building a world-class university. The first is people, the second is people, and the third is people. And so I think what this slide really demonstrates is that the key to the growth of research, and indeed, as we will shortly see, research quality in the region has been the recruitment and the training of really, really outstanding people. So in terms of research impact, measured by field-weighted citation impact, or FWCI, citation rates per publication surpass the average level of China and the world. And so it can be attributed to a higher proportion of excellent output of the GBA compared to that across the rest of the country and the world. So Hong Kong's role in this, if you look at that first purple bar at the top, is significant. So you're looking at a world average FWCI of 1, Hong Kong 1.9, the GBA 1.5, the GBA without including Hong Kong is 1.3, and for the rest of China, you're looking at 1.1. If you look at citations per publication, if you look at the share of publications that are appearing in the top 1% of globally high impact journals, you can see that for the share of publications, Hong Kong's at 7.5%, the GBA is at 5.2, the GBA without Hong Kong is at 4.3. Again, these metrics place Hong Kong and the region higher than national and global averages. But I think what's really stark about those three purple bars at the top there is that Hong Kong really does an outstanding job in contributing to quality within the research domain across the GBA. So Hong Kong's contribution to the GBA's research outputs and research excellence is also demonstrated in high researcher productivity. So our researchers are very good at producing lots of really good papers. And so we can see that per active author in Hong Kong, we've got 2.2 average publications, 1.3 for the GBA, and 1 for the GBA without Hong Kong. And then if you look at the average number of top 1% high impact journals publications per active author, you're looking at Hong Kong 0.14, substantially higher than what you see in the GBA and the GBA without factoring in Hong Kong. So around 87% of research done in the region is contributed by academic institutions. While research output of government-type organizations, and by government-type organizations, I'm talking principally about the learned academies. So the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the Chinese Academy of Engineering, but in terms of the actual the research activity, the active government-type organizations in Guangdong largely are confined to the Chinese Academy of Sciences. But actually, even in the case of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, there's a very strong role for Hong Kong in seeding their presence within Guangdong. So Shenzhen is home to something called the Shenzhen Institute of Advanced Technology, which is directly under the Chinese Academy of Sciences. It was established, I think, it was established in 2006, and so nearly 20 years ago, and it was done as part of a collaboration with the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And so CUHK were instrumental in the development of what is now effectively independently one of the most significant producers of R&D in the region. But again, it was seeded through a partnership and an investment with Chinese University of Hong Kong in 2006. So 87% of the research in the GBA is through academic institutions with a field-weighted citation impact of 1.55. Corporate R&D, 3.7%. And I'll talk you through some of the corporate R&D numbers in a moment. But of course, it's quite logical to conclude that if you're home to companies like BYD, Tencent, Huawei, and DJI, that companies that are doing technology also have remarkable commitments to R&D in their own right. So Huawei as an organization for some years has a policy of investing 20% of their total revenue. I'll share that with you again. 20% of total company revenue gets invested in R&D. Now, the R&D outputs that we're talking about here, I should say, are limited to R&D outputs that appear in peer-reviewed academic journals. So obviously in corporate R&D world, there's a lot of R&D work that does not necessarily end up in journals. So this is just one metric, but I think it probably underestimates the total amount of corporate R&D that's going on out there. Medical sector, 3.6%. It's got an FWCI, which is below the GBA. Government, so this government one, again, that's Chinese Academy of Sciences, accounts for a smaller share of pubs, of publications, but a pretty strong FWCI indicating good quality. So let's have a look at outputs. Let's have a look at publications by universities within the region. So Sun Yat-sen University, which is located about 20 minutes from where I'm sitting here in Guangzhou. Sun Yat-sen University, 74,485 publications, so leads in terms of outputs. And, some people say that a lot of Chinese universities over recent years have become, kind of journal factories with all kinds of incentives and reward systems and KPIs in place to really incentivize publications appearing in journals. South China University of Technology, also located in Guangzhou. Hong Kong U, Shenzhen U, Hong Kong Polytech, Chinese University of Hong Kong. So my institution, we produced 28,760 papers, but we have the highest field-weighted citation impact rate in the of the institutions studied, which I must say we found particularly gratifying. So you can see here that there's a lot of research coming out of universities within the region, and generally speaking, I can see just two exceptions. You're looking at field-weighted citation impacts of over 1.5. So 5 out of the 10 best performing institutions were based in Hong Kong, with 4 of them ranking in the top 5. And as I just shared with you, CUHK demonstrated the highest research impact. But I think it's, again, it comes back to what I shared with you a few slides ago about the performance of Hong Kong's university ecosystem as a kind of distinct cluster, with 5 of them in the top 100 versus what we see on the mainland side of the border. And I think that's really important, to say that, because people, of course, have a tendency to become rankings obsessed. And, we know so many university presidents and vice chancellors around the world are increasingly obsessed with QS and Times Higher Education and other university rankings. But I do think that, while the point I'm making is not about pursuing rankings for the sake of rankings, I'm talking about the research outputs and the research quality, which form a really important component to what it is that makes a university. So I think, these 2 slides really demonstrate quite nicely the role that Hong Kong's universities play and the value that they can create, the development of the vision to turn this into an integrated megapolis of 75 million plus people focused on high technology industry. In terms of corporates, so looking at, again, only their publications. So China Southern Power Grid has the highest number of publications, followed closely by Huawei, and then you've got Tencent as well. So it's interesting to note that both Huawei and Tencent are also generating pretty good FWCI. And we've also highlighted here SenseTime Group, which has figures there in purple, as well as China Unicom. So they're in purple because these are the only two corporates in this mix that are actually headquartered in Hong Kong. So SenseTime Group is a listed company on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. I should add that while it was preparing for its initial public offering, it was sanctioned by the United States. It specializes in artificial intelligence, facial recognition, and a whole range of others. Curiously, it was also founded, so its four founders were and remain as full professors of the Faculty of Engineering at my university, the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So they have a field-weighted citation impact of a 4.63, which is exceptionally high. So let's talk about, so we spent a bit of time giving you an overview of the macro environment of the GBA, its policy, what it means for integration of research. We've spoken about research outputs. We've spoken a bit about research quality. But what are we actually doing, and how does it differ across the region? In which areas are we publishing, and where do we see research intensity? So if you look at this slide, and so you've got red, which is the GBA overall, the white one there, GBA without Hong Kong, and purple just Hong Kong. What you see is that engineering, medicine, and computer science were the top three most published areas of the GBA and Hong Kong. But I would draw your attention to the last discipline, which appears there on the slide, which is social sciences. So you see the mainland side there being non-existent in social sciences. And as a social science person myself, that gives me cause for a lot of concern. But you can see Hong Kong's role here in this is that Hong Kong adds some competitive firepower for the region in social sciences. I think it was Mahatma Gandhi that said that science without humanity is one of the world's deadly sins. I've been told that was actually erroneously attributed to Bapuji, but nonetheless, regardless of who said it, I think it's a really powerful thing to say. But Hong Kong's role in the social sciences mix here is important. I think this is a reflection of the mainland's recent focus on really, really rapidly developing capacity in high technology industry, the hard sciences, and so on, which is I think wonderful, because of course we need more STEM, and we need more of it so that our economy can keep growing, and that we can have really outstanding universities. But Hong Kong does provide competitive firepower without which the region would struggle. My university in Shenzhen, we already have a School of Humanities and Social Sciences. We have a brand new graduate school of public policy, which was set up in September. And that's led by a great international relations scholar, formerly from Singapore, Professor Zheng Yongnian. And we are doing work there on public policy, on international relations, on a whole range of others as well. But you can see that as an entity, the GBA without Hong Kong, and Hong Kong's role in really driving that social sciences research is really important. There are a whole range of reasons for this, some of which may be determined by government preferences and political environments and so on and so forth, but also where Hong Kong's universities have come from. My university in Hong Kong, I should say, was founded in 1963 as the product of the merger of three colleges into a federal university system, which was largely predicated on research into Chinese studies and Chinese culture. And so, there is this intellectual history there. And of course, You look at higher education in mainland China in the 1960s, it was the Maoist era and the Gaokao system was suspended. And so it was a very different time. And so, we've had time to develop the humanities in a way that perhaps institutions on the mainland side of the border haven't. So although the GBA and Hong Kong had the highest output share in medicine, even surpassing the mainland 16.3%, our relative activity index was lower than the world. So it indicates that research activity in medicine in both regions in medicine was less active. We had a higher RAI in engineering and computer science, suggesting that we're more specialized in these subjects. And compared to the GBA, Hong Kong had stronger presence in social sciences, what we were just talking about, computer science, while the GBA was more specialized in biochemistry, genetics and molecular biology, chemical engineering, chemistry, environmental science, material science, physics, and astronomy. So it's worth pointing out that an RAI which is higher than 1.0 implies a greater emphasis on a certain subject than the rest of the world, while an RAI lower than 1.0 suggests a lesser focus. Let me just move to the next slide. Here we go. So for research subfields, the GBA in Hong Kong, we have the most outputs in electrical and electronic engineering. Hong Kong's got a higher share of outputs in subfields such as civil and structural, renewable energy, sustainability, and the environment, whereas the GBA stronger focus on electronic, optical, and magnetic materials and condensed matter physics. Just on civil and structural engineering, I just want to say something here, which is an aside to this report, but I think it's nonetheless a fact which is worth sharing in the context of where China's higher education system is currently going. There was an interesting piece a few weeks ago in the South China Morning Post, which talked about civil engineering. And as we all know, China's going through a real estate cycle at the moment, is the most diplomatic way I can put it. So we know there's pressure on the property market in China, and over the last 20 to 30 years, as China's been building, more buildings than is possibly imaginable, civil engineering became a hugely popular discipline at university for Gaokao students, as one would expect. Students often go where the jobs are the most plentiful. But what we're now seeing on the back of this point of the property cycle in China, with a lot of pressure on the sector, we're seeing demand for civil engineering programs in China actually go down quite substantially. And even Tongji University in Shanghai, which is the nation's most prestigious place for civil engineering, reporting declining interest and pressure academically in an administrative sense, because fewer students means less funding. And so I just think it's interesting that we're seeing anything now related to artificial intelligence and computer science and so on and so forth. Now that we're in the era of generative AI, seeing areas like that pick up, but more traditional areas like civil have been waning a bit. So what does all this mean for knowledge transfer? And so we talk a lot about you've heard me talk about high technology industry, those three words, and I mentioned in my opening remarks, I spoke about high quality productive forces, 新质生产力. So what does all this mean for how this research is going to be applied, and what is the data telling us? So we've already spoken about quality measured by field-weighted citation impact, and so we've learned that generally speaking, the region's producing a lot of research, and it's of a very high quality, but how is that likely to be applied in an industrial context? So it perhaps comes as no surprise that the GBA and Hong Kong are actively engaged in academic, corporate, collaborative research, with our share of academic, corporate, collaborative publications and their corresponding impact well above China and indeed the world. And the performance of Hong Kong surpasses that of the GBA. So in terms of a share of academic, corporate, collaborative publications, you're looking at, so of the publications that are produced, what percentage of them are done in partnership with between a university or a team of researchers and industry, So in Hong Kong, you're looking at 4.9%, the GBA 4.8, the GBA without Hong Kong 4.7, 2.9% for the rest of the country, 2.7% for the world. In terms of the quality of these publications measured by field-weighted citation impact, Hong Kong with a level of 4, the GBA 2.47, the GBA without Hong Kong 1.81, China 1.56, and the world 1.64. And so working to the North Star of industry publications has certainly taken off. And if you look at the way universities are recruiting people, if you look at the emphasis that they now place on contract research, on research commercialization, joint laboratories with industry, and so on and so forth, really taken off. So if you look at the Hong Kong government in, I think, 2000 and it would have been around 2018, 19, it launched Inno Hong Kong, or Innovate Hong Kong, which I think from memory saw, the exact number eludes me, but it would have been around, and we can perhaps check this in the discussion if it's of interest, but I think the figure 10 billion Hong Kong dollars rings out to me, which is all about setting up research laboratories for universities that have a high potential to achieve research commercialization outcomes. And in last year's Chief Executive Policy Address, which is the annual policy blueprint for the Hong Kong government, there was a new scheme announced called Raise Plus. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it is a matching funding scheme for projects that universities pitch, and the funding's matched based on what industry is put in, and they have to meet all kinds of KPIs and important milestones in order for them to proceed to phase 2 of the project. So from the perspective of political will in the region, and the way that universities are organizing themselves, and the language that they speak when it comes to engaging with industry, and the way that we are incentivizing our academic rank and file, we are seeing that certainly shift. So between 18 and 22, Huawei, Tencent, and China Southern Power were the corporate institutions leading academic corporate collaborative output in the GBA, each with 3,000 academic corporate collaborative publications, accounting for more than 60% of their total research output. So Hong Kong had smaller collaborative outcome volume, but CUHK, my university, we had strong scholarly impact with an FWCI higher than 6. So again, this is another reminder, and so I shared with you earlier on in the presentation, which companies were producing how much work in terms of published papers. And there's I think a fairly strong correlation between that, not surprisingly, and what we see here in terms of which of those companies are working with the region's universities. And so for a company like Huawei, which, as we've learned, spends 20% of their annual revenue directly back into R&D, a whole manner of ways with which their research workforce interact with industry and sponsor projects, and collaborate. So very strong. So in terms of patent citations, this is an interesting measure. So patent citations is if you go and register a patent, how many other people around the world cite your patent in their work, which is an important barometer of whether your research finding is generating interest, and therefore one potential measure of research commercialization potential. So yeah, so Sun Yat-sen University, University of Hong Kong, Chinese U, my institution, 3 leading institutions based on patent citations, and Tencent ranking 6, the only corporate in the region among the top 10 to have their patents cited. So in terms of connecting China and the world, what does all this mean? And so, we talked earlier about the GBA's role and the integration agenda. Now, one of the very unique features of Hong Kong, for many years, by virtue of its role formerly as a British colony in close proximity to the rest of the country, but latterly, since 1997, as a special administrative region operating under the one country, two systems framework with a high degree of autonomy, it means that it can interact with the world in ways that that the mainland doesn't or can't. And so, you look at things like capital control and currency convertibility, and the fact that the Hong Kong dollar since the 1980s has been pegged to the greenback, aviation connectivity, concentration of global financial services, a globally connected stock market, and so on. Hong Kong has for many years played a role as a bridge between China and the world. Indeed, the founding mission of the Chinese University of Hong Kong in 1963, 结合传统与现代，融汇中国与西方. For those of you that don't speak Chinese, that is to combine tradition and modernity and to connect China and the West. I personally don't like the fact that it's that we limit ourselves to just the West, and I would much prefer it if it were to connect China and the world. But I think at its core, nonetheless, despite the fact that it says the West, actually what we're talking about is that bridge. And so if you think about what that means in a university sense, and for what it means for institutions on the mainland side of the border, Hong Kong is a very powerful platform to foster collaborations and greater mobility of people between China and the rest of the world. Indeed, one of the reasons why there are 6 joint venture campuses such as mine sitting on the mainland side of the border is to foster stronger and deeper international connectivity. So with all of that in mind, I think it's powerful to look at research collaborations and their field-weighted citation impact, and break them down between, in this case, my university, because I'm biased, Hong Kong as a whole, so the entire university sector of Hong Kong, and research in the entire GBA. And if you look at the green ones there, so for CUHK, 43% of our research collaborations are international. And you compare that with the mainland and it's 30%, right? And if you look at our collaborations within Hong Kong, it's not surprising that we write papers in collaboration with other academics based in the one city. That happens. It's a global phenomena across universities the world over. So you're looking at 9.5% of our collaborations produced with other institutions in Hong Kong, 6.5% rather within the GBA, excluding Hong Kong. So I think what this demonstrates is that the real global connectivity of Hong Kong and what it means for its university system. And bearing in mind, if you look below the pie charts and look at the bar charts there, what you can see is that in terms of citations and their impact, the citation rate for our internationally co-authored papers are significantly higher than those that we do elsewhere. And so while they're higher for the rest of Hong Kong and the GBA, or perhaps in this context, it's best to focus on the GBA. While they are higher for everybody, the power of those international links is really quite spectacular. We are seeing basically, for universities in Hong Kong, one of their defining features has been their ability to attract people from around the world. And so, typically the way it's fallen at CUHK has been that 1/3 of our faculty come from Hong Kong. They're Hong Kong locals, many of whom have gone off and pursued higher degrees in other parts of the world and then come back. So a third from Hong Kong, a third from the mainland, and then a third from everywhere else. And so other universities in Hong Kong and indeed CUHK over the last, I think probably since the COVID-19 pandemic, are starting to see that shift a little in that we are seeing more mainland scholars coming to work in Hong Kong than historically had been the case. But if you think about this blueprint for the GBA and the very notion of stronger integration, it's perhaps not surprising that that more mainland academics are coming. Not to mention, the fact that mainland China has sent out, hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of its nationals over decades now to pursue PhDs around the world. The mainland people that we're attracting, 9 times out of 10 are coming to us with qualifications from Ivy League institutions, Russell Group universities in the United Kingdom, and so on and so forth. So they might be mainland, but they're certainly international in terms of their experience, their qualifications, where they've worked. And I'll also say that, and this is perhaps very timely, given that we've just witnessed the re-election of Donald Trump to the White House, is that the geopolitical environment and issues such as the now cancelled China initiative, pursuing collaborations between US academics and Chinese, and just the whole environment around geopolitical temperature, I think has actually made us the beneficiary of in terms of our academic recruitment, because you've got lots of ethnic Chinese that work in the United States, but also places like Australia and the UK, who have felt particularly uncomfortable about being targeted on the back of changing government policy and just a generally volatile geopolitical environment. And so for faculty members that have spent time in the US or Australia or wherever, for those that have had the international experience and want to come back to China, a very good destination for them is a place like Hong Kong, because we've got we don't have the firewall and all kinds of other things which do exist on the mainland side of the border. That said, our university in Shenzhen, we've got 650 faculty members. We've recruited 5 Nobel Prize winners in 10 years, 3 of whom have set up biomedicine laboratories that take postdocs and all sorts. So, we do have, even though we're not in Hong Kong, we do have a very strong international faculty mix. And for some strange reason, this is showing a repeat of a slide that I shared with you before. So I won't repeat that. But if you are interested in downloading the full report, there is a QR code now on your screen. Highly encourage you to read the report, to digest it, and learn more about the development of research impact and where R&D is going in the GBA. And with that, I'd like to thank you, and I'll hand back over to Ravi, and I'd be delighted to take questions.
Thank you very much, Laurie. That was absolutely fascinating. The level of detail that you had, the data, the comparisons, really, I think, are quite an eye-opener for many of us, I'm sure. Now, before I hand over for the questions, I'd like to ask you one myself, using my privilege as a chairperson. But you can answer it straight away, or you can club it together with something else, as you please. So I was interested in one of the last statistics you showed, that in research collaborations with international universities and centers of learning are about 42% in your university and 30% across the mainland, which is quite a reasonable figure. But my question is, let me frame this properly. The areas where the US and the West in general have put restrictions and constrictions, the so-called critical areas, semiconductors, AI, you mentioned biomedicine, maybe some aspects of genetic research and so on, are those having the effect of choking or restricting either the research quantity or the research quality of the work that is going on in these so-called sectors? So what I'm trying to get at is, to what extent is it constricting, if at all, the advancement in frontier areas?
Yeah.
So I'll leave it there. I'll just want to check with Rahul. Are there any questions in the chat box?
Mr. Boothlingham, I can't see any questions right now.
Okay. So then, Laurie, I think you have time and space to answer my questions. And meanwhile, I'm sure others will be ready with their questions.
Sure. Look, it's a really interesting question. I think the data that I talked you through was 18 to 22. And so because it was produced at the back end of 23, launched at the beginning of 24, we didn't have a full year of 23 data to share. And so and to be honest, I've not actually looked at the 23 data, but there is no doubt that the entity list, sanctions, restrictions are having an impact on, I think, the tone of collaborations that occur between China, including Hong Kong, and its international partners. I say the tone because there was, rather than necessarily the substance, because I was reading somewhere a few weeks ago that joint papers between China and the US in AI has grown dramatically over the last few years, and so I think there is still a really deep willingness to collaborate across a whole range of areas. I think that we are more mindful about the environment that we are operating in, as are the universities that we talk to. Certainly in terms of their administrators and their leadership. I think that academics, so the rank and file, the engine room who do all of the work, academics being instinctively collaborative people, and prone to, if they have a great idea, to talk to a colleague or a peer about it. I think our academics are as motivated to work with one another as they ever have been. I think that administrations, certainly on all sides, have become more cautious. There was an interesting snapshot of data which gives us another perspective on this, which is QS World University Rankings. They have a new component of their methodology which is focused on international research, and so they look at a university's network of research collaborations, and because of one country, two systems, mainland China is treated in the same way as Thailand or India, or and what it found was that there is a lot more research collaboration occurring between Hong Kong universities and institutions in the Chinese mainland. Now, I don't think that people are doing that because they think, oh, we can't go and work with Carnegie Mellon or MIT anymore because Donald Trump and Joe Biden won't let us. I think it's because Hong Kong's right on the doorstep of the rest of the country. There's a government agenda in the form of the GBA specifically designed to nurture and foster more integration and more collaboration. And there's that other thing that makes academics really motivated is research funding. There's money on the table to support these things. And so I think that people are pivoting towards mainland China, not necessarily because of the geopolitical environment, although I think that's a factor. I think that people are doing it because because there's a remarkable, rapidly growing ecosystem that most academics see, and they think, oh, I can go and play with with some really, really exciting, brand new, flashy research kit in Shenzhen that I don't have in Hong Kong, and I want to be a part of that. And so I think that there's a bit of that happening too. But I think what Hong Kong's challenge in all of this. And indeed, I don't think it's limited to just higher education. I think it's a challenge for Hong Kong overall. Is this balancing act between how much it pivots to deeper integration with the mainland through initiatives like the GBA, stronger people-to-people connectivity, greater economic connectivity, and so on and so forth. I mean, what's the opportunity cost for that in terms of Hong Kong's links with the rest of the world? And so, the government is attempting to have the best of both worlds, but does it have, who's got the bandwidth to do absolutely everything and in a resource constrained environment? And so I think that's a challenge. And so and also the way Hong Kong thinks about its international relationships, because we are living in a very different world to the one of 10 years ago, or when when China resumed the exercise of sovereignty of Hong Kong in 1997 after the handover. And so it's a bit like my university's mission. Hong Kong's always thought of itself as, the bridge between China and the West, right? I think the challenge for Hong Kong is waking up to realize that actually there's an opportunity that's bigger than just the West. It's called the rest of Asia. It's called the global South. And Hong Kong is waking up to this. So Hong Kong's played an active role now for many years in the Belt and Road Initiative. Hong Kong, the government have sent delegations to the Middle East, and so doing a lot in the UAE, doing a lot in Saudi Arabia. There's a big push for family offices being set up in Hong Kong because we've in the COVID years, a few family offices that were actually probably originally Chinese moved to Singapore for all kinds of complicated reasons, and so Hong Kong as a city is pivoting its relationships and its networks to other parts of the world. And so I think and that's actually in alignment with national policy, around things like Belt and Road and so and Global South and shared community for mankind and other things that the central government's talking about. So it is, but I think that there's this piece in there which is from a mainland China perspective, Hong Kong's attractive because of its international links, and so if its links get pivoted too far on the mainland side and we don't have any international links left, then we're going to be less attractive. Do you know what I mean? And so I think there's,
Right.
there's a bit of that going on as well. But there are all kinds of, reasons, social, political, financial, economic, that drive a lot of that. But, it's a fascinating piece to be involved with. I must say, I hope that's contributed to answering some of your question, Ravi.
Great. Thank you. That was a very detailed, very interesting answer, and I'm sure that others would have picked up aspects of it. So let's see what there is in the chat box, and if there is nothing, Rahul, we can have the raise hands option after that.
All right, Mr. Bhutlingam. Right now, I can't see any questions, but I have a question if I may.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, as the title of our seminar is the rise of China's Silicon Valley. So you talked about what happened in Greater Bay Area, but my question is, in comparison to the actual Silicon Valley, where does the Greater Bay Area stands? Particularly in the context of the talk that China is going to take over America in terms of science and technology?
Yeah. So is your question whether China will overtake the US in terms of China science and technology?
I mean, the comparison between China's Silicon Valley and actual Silicon Valley, basically.
Yeah. Oh, look, I think that there's no doubt that that China has made remarkable progress. And as Ravi said in his introductory remarks about that article in The Economist, China is a science and technology superpower. There's no doubt in my mind. I could see someone joining the call a few minutes ago with the username of Redmi, which is Xiaomi, right? I drove a Xiaomi electric vehicle here this afternoon, which was launched after $10 billion of investment over 3 years, and I paid £25,000 for it. It looks like a Porsche, and it drives better than a Porsche. And so for China to have the industrial resources, the convening power to get industry working together like that with such speed, I think is remarkable. But is China capable of saying that the GBA or another science and technology cluster within the country, is it Silicon Valley? And indeed, I had a question mark. I don't think we're there quite yet. I think whether we will get there depends a lot on a whole range of factors. And not least of which is the outcome of the race for the White House, which, as your question came in, I just saw an alert on my phone saying he's just been officially elected president. So yeah, the world is changing, but I also think that it's a bit like the Transinguo phenomenon, right? And so I think that it may well be a catalyst for China to again think differently about the way it ascends the value chain and pivot in another direction or accelerate its efforts in one. But I think that Silicon Valley has and you're Indians, this better than I do. I mean, the mythical appeal of Silicon Valley, which part of it, I think one of the things that makes Silicon Valley is the kind of mythical godlike status that it has, and the day I have young IIT graduates, queuing at the door of the Chinese University of Hong Kong, Shenzhen, to go and do a PhD in computer science or artificial intelligence, and then say that they're going to become a unicorn and found a business. The day I've got queues of them lining out my office, I'm not sure that we're going to be there. And again, I think that's bigger than just, that's bigger than just money. It's bigger than just one university. I think it's California, I mean, we have Disneyland in Hong Kong, but, Disneyland's not ours, I mean, there's this entire cultural phenomenon that is the United States, which feeds into what Silicon Valley is all about. And actually, I think the quest for us to say, oh, let's go and build China's Silicon Valley, I think we're on a fool's errand, because we shouldn't, and I don't think we should be looking to replicate Silicon Valley. I think that we should be developing something that's distinctly Chinese, that's fundamentally internationally oriented, and something that has its own appeal, because I think that we're just not going to have that. I don't think we're going to have the opportunity to play on that cultural stage in quite the same way that the United States has. But I think it's I think and to be honest, I think the Chinese government, and believe me, I don't speak for them, but I think that I think the Chinese government will be the first to agree. Actually, we don't want to copy Silicon Valley. We want something that we need something that's got a Chinese character, that's got a Chinese flavor to it, that can stand on its own 2 feet as being a major globally significant stakeholder and player in science, innovation, and the broader innovation economy which exists around it.
All right. Thank you. So there is one
there is Rahul.
Yeah.
I've received a question on my direct feed,
All right.
on my direct line, from a questioner who wants to remain anonymous. So let me read the question out exactly how it is for Laurie to tackle. Now, here it is. It says, recently there are research monographs from Professor David Zweig and BBC reports about the risks faced by Chinese scientists on research collaborations with mainland Chinese or even Hong Kong academics. How can CUHK mitigate the risks when doing scientific works in the GBA?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, we have a responsibility to, and to be clear, I no longer represent CUHK in Hong Kong. So we are for all intents and purposes an independent university. Our degrees are conferred by CUHK. So all of our quality assurance and everything, all of our programs are approved by the CUHK Senate. Students graduate with a CUHK degree, but in terms of administrative, finance, HR, and so on, the two systems are not connected. So I can't claim to represent CUHK anymore in the way that I did. But what I would say is that, and I've not read the media reports that the questioner is referring to, is that first and foremost, as with universities everywhere around the world, they need to operate within the framework of the legal and regulatory environment that they find themselves in. And so the responsibility that universities have to their staff is to ensure that their work is legally compliant, that it adheres to regulatory standards, be they working in Hong Kong, the laws of the nation. Indeed, if they're collaborating overseas and they go overseas, they expect their staff to respect the laws of the place that they're working in. I mean, I think that risk management in universities is it's a growing challenge at universities all around the world, and the duty of care that people have to their staff around occupational health and safety, and making sure that they're aware of the risks that they inevitably expose themselves to if they're engaged in any form of collaboration. I think that CUHK as an institution, and again, I don't speak for them, has been very good at building meaningful, high impact collaborations with mainland China and elsewhere. And I think that while there are risks, I think that the university does everything it can to manage them, and also operate in compliance with the law of the land, the law of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, the law of the People's Republic of China, and that's the environment that that Hong Kong's a part of the People's Republic of China. That's a fact. I would also point out that I think it's Article 137 of the Basic Law of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region guarantees institutional autonomy and academic freedom. And that's the Basic Law is the mini constitution. That's what it's often referred to as. And that's a right conferred to all universities and academic institutions in the Hong Kong SAR. And I know from having worked there for 3 years that institutional autonomy and academic freedom is it's alive and well, and it's thriving. I'm not sure if I've answered the question, but I hope I've made my best endeavors to.
Thank you. Thank you, Laurie.
Mr. Bhuthlingam, there is a hand raised.
There's a hand raised. Okay. Let's go. Who is the person there?
I have asked them to unmute them.
Yeah, yes, I think Professor Rappai, I see the hand.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Ravi, and thank you, Laurie. I have a brief question. First of all, thanks to Laurie for explaining so many things in clear and in an understandable manner. My first question is about the social sciences. You mentioned that one of the figures you've shown. I understand that now Hong Kong or GBA going to be a lot of things regarding to the social sciences. How much you think that that area will pick up? Because earlier, as an old generation China studies person, we used to look to Hong Kong for a lot of material coming out from Hong Kong in different ways. That is first part of my question. Second, and important, because apart from, you see, I don't want to get into a comparison between China and Hong Kong or China and US. But actually, there is a lot of things which can do the universities in between these two extremes. You see, I don't think our students, or at least the people in many universities, are aware about the opportunities or the chances they have in GPA or linked universities. Because I attended some conferences in Shenzhen some few years back. So I don't want to get into that. But the possibilities of an English-speaking person or English-knowing student, I think it is much more than in any other part of China. And for example, how much you think a place like Singapore can be incorporated into the university system or the research collaborations and understanding better including the science and technology and all other areas. Thanks for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Rapai. I really appreciate your questions, and thank you for your comments. I'm glad that you found the presentation useful and informative. Look, I think in terms of social sciences, I mean, I'm thrilled that as a quote unquote more senior, I think they're the words you said, China studies specialist, that you've looked to Hong Kong for insights for a long time, and long may that be the case. I mean, for CUHK in Hong Kong, Chinese studies it's the core of the institution. It's what attracted me there as a China person, and it's one of the things that still makes me proud to be affiliated with the CUHK family. I know that Chinese studies, if you look at the current strategic plan of CUHK, it's got four strategic research themes. One is innovative biomedicine, the other is automation, the other is environment and sustainability, and the other is China. And so China, and China studies by default exists as the soul of the institution. And in terms of further capacity, I mean, I know that next year the art museum at CUHK, which is home to Qing dynasty, Ming dynasty treasures, some of the largest collections of stuff that you can find outside of the Forbidden City in many categories. Oracle bones, Jiagu Wen, for example. There's a whole new wing of that museum worth hundreds of millions of dollars that is going to be opened next year. And we did an exhibition actually last year in collaboration with the Forbidden City at the Forbidden City in Beijing, and a lot of research coming from our art museum, and a deep commitment to public engagement and being part of that. And of course, you now have a palace museum of the Forbidden City permanently in Hong Kong, and so there's there's a lot happening in that space, which is great. At CUHK in Shenzhen, we're looking at our options for doing more China studies, and what we might do at an undergraduate major level. And like CUHK in Hong Kong, we have core Chinese as a requirement. Your other questions about the attractiveness and the awareness of the GBA for young scholars and others, and the comparison with Singapore. One of the things I didn't say in my remarks about my university, CUHK in Shenzhen, is that our language of instruction is in English. Despite being called the Chinese University of Hong Kong, 香港中文大学, you know, the Zhongwen, the Chinese in our name is actually referring to the Chinese civilization, Chinese culture, rather than, you know, the language per se. So the medium of instruction for us on campus, like our home institution in Hong Kong, is English. And so I think it, you know, that gives us a unique appeal to global scholars and global students that are interested in experiencing China. Obviously, we do teach Chinese, and we, as I said, we have a core Chinese requirement both for domestic and international students, albeit the international one is, you know, the content is different to what you'd study if you were a domestic student where Chinese is your first language. And so there's more than enough for you to do in terms of experiencing China, getting to understand China, learning Chinese, but you can do it in a way that you know, you'd frankly struggle to in other universities in China, and you've got the, you know, we have a collaborative dual major program with CUHK in Hong Kong, which means that a student can spend 2 years of their degree in Shenzhen, 2 years of their degree in Hong Kong. They can experience, they can have a unique and absolutely authentic mainland China experience, but they can also, you know, have access to the global financial center that is Hong Kong. And so they can, you know, they can have and straddle the best of both worlds. We've only got 2 of those programs in place at the moment. One is in interdisciplinary data analytics. There's another one in aerospace and earth science. But there are more in the pipeline, and without wanting to divulge too much, I know that discussions are actively underway in relation to China studies as well. And so, you know, these are the sorts of things that we hope to bring to our you know, to our current student and indeed our prospective student community. And it's a, you know, it's a unique, you know, what we have is a unique offering within the context of China's higher education system. It's something that that we're very proud of. You know, we've got the rigor of CUHK, as I said before, in response to the last question, that we have the, you know, our all of our degrees are regulated by CUHK. Whenever we want to set up a new program, it's got to be approved by the CUHK Senate. And so we've got the, you know, the rigor and the quality assurance of CUHK, but we've got the, you know, we've got the Shenzhen environment. I mean, I like to say that, you know, you've got the great tradition of CUHK. Its focus over 6 decades on China studies, latterly things like information engineering and its faculty of science, which was one of its founding faculties in its business school, and the rigor and the depth of the tradition that that CUHK is known for. And we fuse that with a city like Shenzhen, which is, as I've said, home to, you know, fantastic technology companies. Another fun fact for you is that despite China's aging population, Shenzhen is home to China's youngest average population. So the average age of the population in Shenzhen is, I think, 38, which is very young. And we also, you know, say that 来了就是深圳人. So the moment you come, you're a Shenzhener. Because, you know, 40 years ago, there was nothing in the city. It was a fishing village. And so it's grown out of nothing in 40 years to become a city of 18 million people, an economy bigger than Hong Kong. And so to do that, we've had to import a lot of people from the rest of the country. And so, you know, what that gives you is a very young population. It gives you a very educated population. And it gives you, you know, it gives you a sense where, you know, it's a place where, you know, great things can happen when great minds come together. Yeah.
Thank you, Laurie. That has really been a wonderful presentation with a lot of energy and vitality and depth, I must say, and you have stimulated our interest. We at ICS will be in touch with you for further talks and collaborations, certainly. And I would encourage all our other viewers to really follow up this fascinating subject, because it is the way of the future, at least in certain directions. Thank you once again, Laurie. Thank you to
Ravi.
All of our all colleagues who've joined us. This brings us to the end of the session. May I wish you a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Hope to meet you in person one day, Ravi. See you later. Bye-bye.
One day, certainly. Look
Thank
forward
you.
to it.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair. With this, we come to the end of today's seminar. We thank Mr. Laurie POC and Mr. Bhutlingam for gracing today's seminar with their presence and for giving us their precious time. We also offer our gratitude to the audience. The video of today's discussion shall be available on the ICS YouTube channel. We invite you to the upcoming Wednesday seminar scheduled for November 30. Further information regarding the event can be found on ICS website, and you may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you for joining us today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.